Hey, and welcome back to The Composed Artist. I'm Stephanie. I'm your host. I'm maybe a little hoarse today. I've been fighting this summer cold for like a week and it just won't go away. So I'm a little sore, but whatever. Here we are. Here we go. I get asked a lot from other artists who are not live wedding painters yet, but they want to be. They're thinking about, adding this service to their repertoire. They asked me, do you ever get tired of painting the same thing over and over again as a wedding painter? Because technically, I do. I show up and I paint one of a variety of moments from a wedding. Um, and it's the wedding is run like a production, so it's predictable to an extent. And I paint a lot of first dances or ceremony moments, ceremony exits, dip and a kiss, things like I paint bride and groom on their wedding day all the time. That's the job. But I don't get tired of it ever, ever, because I get to paint so many more things. And that's what I want to kind of talk about today. All of the things that I get to paint as a live wedding painter, all of the opportunities that I have to be creative and to try new things and to kind of stretch and flex certain muscles as an artist. How in reality, every wedding is different, even weddings that happen at the same venue. I'll paint at the same venue over and over again. Like I'm located outside of New Orleans, and so I'm in the city a lot. So I paint a lot of the same venues over and over again, and I love showing clients who are prospective clients, people who may hire me next year for their wedding. When they tell me what venue they've chosen, I love showing them all of the different paintings I've done at their venue to show how unique each one is. Some artists choose to kind of sketch out the scene before the wedding starts and get a head start that way. I like to start from a blank canvas because, in my opinion, each painting is unique. You're paying for a one of a kind piece of art. But, sometimes the circumstances aren't the same. The lighting is like never the same. The details change. The perspective of the room changes. Your artistic choice for like the viewpoint of the artist or the perspective of the room, the corner of the room from which you choose to paint, all of that can change. So every painting is unique, started from scratch. All of the details are different. The florals are different. The colors are different. The energy is different. The way that you apply paint is different. Anyway, so I paint weddings over and over again, but the details, mm, this is where I get to really play. Okay, so that's what I want to talk about today. The whole, I guess, subject, the title, the point of this episode is to tell you about all the things that I get to paint as a live wedding painter. So let's get started. Welcome to The Composed Artist, the podcast where we explore the intersection of artistry, entrepreneurship, and self improvement and continue to pursue a more composed life. I'm your host, Stephanie, an artist specializing in live wedding painting, living in the vibrant and soulful city of New Orleans. Over the past decade, my job has taken me all over the world, meeting and creating art in front of thousands of people, and has allowed me to create a colorful life for myself and my family. Now, I help other artists build confidence, develop their techniques, and fall in love with the art of live wedding painting. I invite you to join us for inspiring stories of creative journeys, practical tips for running a successful art business, and honest conversations about the joys and challenges of running a studio and being a parent. This podcast is here to keep you company, keep you entertained, and is full of resources to help you on your journey to create a business that feeds your soul, makes an impact, and is insanely profitable. The Composed Artist is the podcast for the bold, creative, passionate, and genuine artist. Let's get started. The first thing that I want to talk about is all of the portraits that I get to paint. In the studio, sometimes I'm given the opportunity to paint a true to life sized portrait. I get to add a lot of detail. They take longer. All of the fine lines and the shifts of tone, shifts of color and temperature in the face, in a larger like 6 to 8 inch portrait size, right? Well, in a wedding painting, usually I'll paint the room and then the figures in the room, in the space, in the setting. So they're on a much smaller scale. So most of my portraits are about the size of a quarter and sometimes even smaller. That's how big my faces are. So understanding all of the structural elements of a face, the variety of skin tones, and how skin tones change based on the color or the light around them, the reflected light, that kind of thing. Understanding how to capture likeness is very important. And then you have to do that on a very small scale in a short amount of time. No pressure. I love that challenge. I think that that's so fun. It is. And let me tell you, there was a point in my career a number of years ago. I've felt differently recently in the past like 5 or 6 years, but in the beginning I was like, "Oh no, what have I done?" I've cornered myself into this niche of the art world where I'm painting faces. I'm painting other people's faces and I'm painting them on a very small scale, which is incredibly challenging. Oh no, what have I done? Because now this is what people expect of me. I have a good friend, Kelly Boyette, who's an artist in New Orleans, and she doesn't paint facial features. And she's explained she can, incredibly talented, but she chooses not to. And if you search her work, I'll link her Instagram account to this episode. But if you look at her work, you can tell why she doesn't need to because of the fisheye perspective and the exaggerated colors and just the energy that she puts into her paintings. She doesn't have to paint faces, and she has explained a number of times in social media posts and on her website why she doesn't paint faces. She don't want to. That's not where she spends her time. It's not necessary to achieve likeness, which is wild. But she does the way that she paints portraits without or figures without having to paint the faces works. It works for her style. Her clients love it. And so she's an artist I like to recommend, and I like to recommend other artists look at whenever they're thinking about, oh, well, I don't know if I want to paint faces. Okay, fine, but you got to do it well, do it right. So I started painting facial features. I was having a lot of fun with getting all that detail. And so, I've kind of encouraged my clients to want that detail, that level of detail. It's not photorealism. I'm clear about that as well. I don't want to do that. That's not the type of artist that I'm striving to be. It's photorealistic, which is also incredible. And I completely understand the desire for that. It's absolutely delicious. I love photorealistic paintings. That's not my style. That's not what I'm doing. So, but I get to paint a lot of portraits, figures, a lot of figures in suits and formal dresses. So that has been the challenge for me, is to be able to capture likeness in a body, movement in a body, get the sense of, yeah, that's what he looks like. This tall, skinny, gangly groom, or somebody who's more muscular, hidden under 3 layers of suits and vests and all kind of stuff, or a woman, different women with different shapes, women who pose for their reference photo, very kind of stiffly. How do I make them not so stiff on the painting? It's been a challenge to add movement or give this sense of liveliness, or even just likeness, like I said, to figures that are mostly covered. Okay. Suits, it's a lot of rectangles. So how do you make a suit? How do you make a figure in a suit not look like boxy, or too stiff, even if they do become stiff in the reference photo? And then do that over and over and over again. How do you create depth in a room with, the bride and the groom in the foreground and then guests in the middle or background? There's a lot of experimenting with values, temperature shifts to push them, kind of give atmospheric perspective and depth, push them further back in the room. There's all kinds of challenges. It's fun to figure out how to do that, and to do that very quickly. Like, you don't have all day, you don't have months to figure that out. You have to make decisions very quickly as a painter, as a live wedding painter. So portraits and figures, yes, clearly it's a portrait. You're painting a portrait of 2 people. Another challenge is painting them intertwined together, whether they're arm in arm, linked arm in arm, walking down the aisle, or they're dancing. How are their 2 figures creating weight balance between the two of them. You know, if it's a dip and a kiss, are you painting the figures in a way that has them balanced in the center of the two bodies? Or does your painting look like, oh my gosh, they're about to topple over and I don't know why? There's a lot to understand about painting two people together. And so that's one of the fun challenges that I enjoy. Hey, live wedding painters, have you taken a minute to evaluate your business yet? Have you started to think about next year yet? As this year comes to a close, it's important for each of us to take a moment and reflect. Did you hit the goals you set for yourself? Did you set goals at the beginning of the year at all? Was there any clarity in your vision for your creative business, or have you just been hanging on for the ride? Now, imagine starting next year with a clear plan, a year where you're building a stellar portfolio and booking dream weddings, showing up with confidence, and taking bold steps toward your career goals. That's exactly what my goal setting workbook is here to help you achieve. Created for the members of my online course, The Wedding Painter's Blueprint, the Goal Setting Workbook is more than just a place to jot down ideas. It is your roadmap to success for the year ahead. With guided evaluations, you'll identify your unique personal and professional challenges. You'll address physical and psychological elements that might be holding you back. And you will set clear, achievable goals and map out the steps to reach them so you can turn your vision into reality. This workbook is free to download and print so you can physically write down your goals. It includes tools to help you track your growth and adjust as needed, and will actually help you take vague dreams and turn them into concrete plans, and turn those plans into real success. Next year doesn't have to feel uncertain. The Goal Setting Workbook will help you take charge of your career and step into the new year with purpose and direction. Click the link in the show notes to download your free version of my goal setting workbook and kick 2025 off with clarity. Aside from portraits, I get to paint a lot of landscapes. Okay, so I want to talk about the different, you could get married anywhere. You can get married in a library, out under a tree, outside, on a farm, in a vineyard, in a ballroom, in a barn. Like, you can get married in, literally, venues are popping up all over the world, and historic places as well. That has been really fun for me, is visiting all of these beautiful locations that have been repurposed or are being used as wedding venues. And so a couple that, I want to talk about, like landscapes, and then also interior venues as well. So for landscapes, likely, unless it's like the middle of the day, which is really bright light, I guess, very high contrast lighting, shadows, usually very hot or very cold, depending on where it is. Usually weddings happen in the evening, and so you get a lot of dusk or sunset or golden hour. The lighting is changing really quickly and dramatically. So I get to make those decisions very quickly. This also is include those decisions kind of happen ahead of time in client confirmation calls. I do like to ask my clients what kind of lighting they would prefer, and then I try to capture that moment. But sometimes it's like, okay, this is it. This is the moment. I have to paint this. And then you have to do it quickly. So I'm working from reference photos, I'm working from life, and I am doing my very best to capture the feeling of the space that we're in. So a lot of evening, like I said, a lot of evening lighting. I've painted at night as well. So getting that kind of inky blue sky with glowing lights, the stars, the moon, glowing string lighting and candles, like getting that effect. That is really fun for me, especially when I arrive at like 4 p.m. Some decisions have to wait until a little bit later, using reference photos that I find online, or, going the night before, getting photos. I don't know. There's a bunch of ways that you can get the references, but I get to paint a lot of landscapes. I really get to flex my plein air muscles. So I love painting outside. I love painting I love talking about and attempting to capture the entire spectrum of greens in the world, and then how the light plays with them, and how the contrast and, like I've said, tonal ranges play with the greens outside, textures, how you can capture the different types of plants and trees based on color and texture. That's so much fun for me. And then to do that in a way that amplifies this moment that is like the ceremony exit or something. That's really fun for me. Challenges that come with painting outside. You're working in the elements. A lot of times it's not necessary to have an outlet or a power source for your lamp because you're outside and the lighting is fair. Like you have a well illuminated canvas for the most part. But if you don't, getting lighting out there is kind of challenging. Can be challenging. Working in the elements, like I said, direct sun, icy cold, high humidity, low humidity. Just working in the elements with just kind of out in the open can be challenging, especially if you're traveling. So I live in South Louisiana. It's very hot down here. I can predict how miserable it'll be painting here, but maybe I can't predict what it'll feel like to paint in Colorado in the mountains in January or whatever, So paying attention to what you can expect with working in the elements. You have to relocate. You don't have to, I guess, if everything's going to be in one place, but oftentimes when the ceremony is outside in the vineyard and then the reception is indoors, you're the entertainment for the night. And so you go and set up and paint the scene before the guests arrive. You get your reference photos and then you move inside. And so you have to like pack up all your stuff. It's possible. I do it all the time, but that's just like an added challenge. And then, like I said, ever changing lighting. You're not working from a reference photo. You can, but it's better to work from observation. In my opinion, your eyes capture so much more nuance than just an iPhone photo or a camera photo. So I prefer and I encourage artists to work from observation whenever possible. But the lighting changes. So what the heck are you going to do if it's daylight when you get there and then when the moment that you're supposed to capture actually happens, the sun has completely set and it's all happened within the span of an hour or 30 minutes. It's just a lot. It's a lot to think about. It can be challenging, but also fun and a fun challenge. I accept that challenge. So that's outside. And let me tell you, the landscapes, yes, it could be a vineyard, like I've said. It could be the mountains. It could be the beach. Oh my gosh, Hawaii with all the palm trees and the colors in the sky. What a dream. Oh, I've painted in some beautiful locations, and that's why I like traveling. That's because I get to talk about new opportunities for new backgrounds and new sceneries and landscapes. And, I'm not even scratching the surface of different countries and different environments in that way, like different terrains in that way. The possibilities are endless. This world is huge and gives us so many beautiful things to paint. So I love the opportunity to paint on a larger format too. I'm talking 24 by 30 and up. Like those are big paintings. And usually when I travel, I try to do little plein air studies, but sometimes I go and come back as quickly as possible to get back to the kids, and it is what it is. Fellow entrepreneurs, listen up. Let's talk about protecting your business. We all know that having a solid contract is essential, but drafting them is daunting and can be very expensive. I'm an artist, I'm not a lawyer for a reason. That's where the legal page comes in. The legal page offers attorney drafted contract templates tailored for creatives and small business owners like you and me. Whether you're a photographer, an artist, a business coach, a designer, or an event planner, or what have you, they've got you covered. These templates are easy to customize and come with very clear instructions that include free future updates. That's huge. I was honored to be asked to review their live event artist contract, and it checks all the boxes for me. Don't leave your business vulnerable. Invest in peace of mind with the Legal Pages contract templates. So, if you're ready to get your business legally legit, head to the show notes and click the link to save 10% off any product in the shop, or use my code StephanieG10. Again, get your business legally legit with a Legal Page contract today. So, landscapes. Beautiful, gorgeous. Now let's talk about interiors. I've painted in many different interior venues, a lot of ballrooms, a lot of barns, a lot of very high ceiling, gorgeous rooms that can hold hundreds of people. Like that's the type of space that you're likely to paint. I've painted very underwhelming spaces, very simple, low budget spaces. I've painted very extravagant, hundreds and hundreds of years old, and like not antique, but buildings that have been around for a very, very long time, and all of the ornate detail that goes into that with the dramatic uplighting that happens in a reception. Just absolutely breathtaking venues, all kind of different challenges, all kind of different perspectives. And then you walk into the room and every square inch is decorated to the nines, and you have to pick one perspective to paint. That can be a challenging decision too. So a lot of windows and walls and ceilings, a lot of chandeliers, a lot of lighting situations, painting light and how the light plays on literally everything in the room, particularly the figures in the room, and then the floor, how light is reflected in the floor. That's something that has to be considered. That's a decision that has to be made and kind of stuck with for the rest of the night, because it doesn't work in one complete scene if the lighting isn't reflected. Like if you're not telling the story of the lighting in the room properly. So that's something that an artist has to be very aware of and make very intentional decisions with. So that's why it's another reason why the live wedding painter is the elite artist. A lot of decisions that you make before the day, when you arrive, and then you like stick to and work with and around for the rest of the night. A lot of fun. I think it's fun. If anybody is ever like terrified to do that, to make those decisions, like if you book a job, if you're an artist and somebody's asked you to paint at their wedding and you are like really nervous about it, reach out and I'll give you a pep talk, because those decisions have to be made, yes, but it's up to you, you know? Even though you've never done it before, you are the expert. You are able to observe, make the decision in your brain, and then reflect that in the brush strokes. And you can set up, I guess I'm going off the rails here now. I'm going into advice mode, but anyway, it's definitely possible. And I think it's a fun challenge. And the more you practice, the more you improve, and then the decisions become easier. And then you become more confident in those decisions. So think about that. Other interiors, a lot of different styles. So for a long time, I painted a lot of barns, and I still paint, barn venues. A lot of rafters, a lot of straight lines, a lot of perspective that you don't want to mess up. A lot of wood grain, a lot of warm spaces, a lot of cool spaces. Some of my paintings are very brown and red and orange and warm. A lot of them are very purple and cool and, green tones, blue tones, based on the room that I'm in. Ballroom pillars, all of I always think back to my art history lessons in college, my art history classes, where you learn about like iconic pillar designs at the top, like all the different styles of the tops of pillars. I don't know, from like the Roman era, but all of those details, that is what I see, and that's a lot of the style elements that the bride and the groom fell in love with when they chose the place. And so, you got to get that in there. So I paint a lot of that. Like I mentioned, some minimalist spaces where it's a lot of plain walls, simple decor. Maybe what was important to them was like the big, huge window overlooking the rolling hills of wherever the location is. Maximalist interior elements, a lot of drapery, a lot of tassels and Regency era style patterns and things like that, venues like that. So when you walk into a space and you're met with all of that detail, you immediately are thinking, what's the most important? How can I capture the essence of what this room is holding? And the bride and the groom, and some of the florals and other elements, if you're painting other family members, things like that. How can I balance all of that, make all of these decisions, execute it on the painting, and do so in 4 to 6 hours? So that's the challenge, but it's, like I said, that's the fun part. So I've had opportunities to paint all of these different spaces and make all of these different decisions, and I'm grateful for it, because my portfolio is very very vast and shows a lot of variety because I've painted all these different spaces. So it's not the same thing over and over again. You get it? It's so fun. You may have heard me talk about my little side business, my little fine art print shop. I create an original painting, I take a photo of it, and I print it, and I print it again and again and again. I make hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars a year on prints. It's so easy. And I learned everything I know about creating my own prints and printing them in-house from Laurie Ann Gonzalez and her Art to Print course. I highly recommend, if you are an artist and you want to make easy money from your original works and even the commission works, you can resell those as prints. I recommend you check out Art to Print. Laurie Ann has a very direct way of teaching, and you are really going to appreciate her no fluff method of giving you information and telling you exactly what you need to do to make making fine art prints in your own studio a breeze. You can check her out online at learn.laurieannart.com. That's learn at LaurieAnnEart.com, or just click the link in the show notes for my affiliate link. Check her out and thank me later. Textures, y'all. Let's talk about the textures. Okay. All of the brush strokes, all of the patterns that I'm trying to achieve, they've been so different over the years. I've painted wrought iron in New Orleans. There's a lot of very decorative wrought iron fences. We have wrought iron railings. Wrought iron is like a designed, a lot of filigree, a pattern heavy iron that's painted black a lot of times. And so capturing the depth and the scrolls and the filigree, the fleur-de-lis, those kind of elements in the iron fences along the balconies down, Bourbon Street or whatever street they're doing their second line down, around the French Quarter. That's a detail it's recognizable and beloved down here. And so like I try to incorporate that as well. You can't that's not really a detail that I would like to leave out if I were painting balconies or buildings down a street with second story and third story balconies. That's something I would want to paint. And so I paint a lot of wrought iron fences and gates, things like that. Lattice work. That's the kind of like patterned fences, wooden fences and things that are used in gardens a lot. A lot of vines will climb up. People will create backdrops for their bands with lattice work. I've done elopements in gardens where there's lattice work, and they love that element of it. That's what they've chosen to put behind their ceremony arch or whatever, weaving vines and climbing wisteria around the lattice work. So I get to paint lattice work. Like that's textural. That's a design element that takes time to execute properly. Wood grain. I've perfected the art of painting wood grain really fast and getting the knots and getting the lines and making it adding variety in there and not making it look like stamped or something. Getting the right tones of the wood. I don't know if you've ever stained wood before. There's like a very wide variety from dark to light of wood stains, and different venues have kind of lean towards darker, warmer, redder, or lighter, like whitewashed stains and things like that. So getting the right tones in the wood grain is really important. So I get to paint that. Fabrics, y'all, satin, lace, velvet, tablecloths, dresses, wedding dresses, veils, sheer wedding veils, getting the essence of a sheer veil. That's been a fun challenge. So you get to paint all of these different textures all in one scene, mirrors, frames, the gold filigree and the look of gold. There's a lot of color that goes into painting gold, and then it's not just like a gold bar, it's a gold frame with ornate detail, getting that. I'm looking at some frames in my studio right now, and I'm like, I see all the colors of a rainbow in the frame. And so getting that essence quickly but expertly, that's a fun challenge. All right, artist friends, if you've been wanting to try oil paints but don't know where to start, I've got the recommendation for you. Chris Fornatero, also known as Paint Coach on YouTube, has an incredible course called The Foundations of Oil Painting, and honestly, it's one of the best resources out there for mastering the basics. Now, I have my own course and mentorship program specifically for artists and live painters, and I'm super proud of the work that we do there. but I'll be the first to tell you we don't go nearly as deep into the fundamentals of oil painting specifically as Chris Fornatero does in this course. He breaks down everything, not only the materials that you need and how to use them, but also value, color mixing, brushwork, and setting up your palette properly so that it clicks. Whether you're brand new to oils or you just want to strengthen your foundation, this is the course that I recommend. To check out the course and support the show, visit paintwithpaintcoach.com or go to my show notes and click the link there that I've provided. Get the skills, the confidence, and the solid foundation to make your best work yet. Painting mirrors and then the reflections of mirrors. A lot of venues will, in order to make the room feel bigger, they will line the walls with mirrors, especially if they don't have windows. If it's an interior space, they'll line them with like faux windows, but they're just mirrors. And so from my perspective, in order to capture that look, I have to, mirror the detail in the room in like further into the mirror, right? So getting that essence and making it look like a mirror and not like a hall or something like that takes practice and skill. So I get to paint mirrors. Surprise about like that's something that you can practice in the studio for sure. All of these things, and that's going to come later as the advice part of this episode, but these are all things that I don't know if you would think about painting or having to paint, being presented with in a room. Let's talk about decoration, florals. Do you know how many flowers there are? Countless. There are countless types of flowers. Yes, you'll see a lot of the same roses and hydrangeas and daisies and snapdragons and all of the eucalyptus leaves, just filler greenery, things like you'll see more frequently and get to paint more frequently. But ranunculus are incredibly detailed to paint. And so getting all of the colors, getting all of the detail in the florals is really important because people really are excited about their florals for the most part. They spend a pretty penny on their floral budget, and so capturing that in the painting. Plus, flowers they give life to a painting. They give color, they give texture, and they add something. They add a little something to a painting that if you didn't paint the flowers in or you didn't I guess amp them up a little bit, the painting would feel still, or I don't want to say dead, but they do add a sense of life and interest to a painting, right? And it is your job to compose an interesting painting. So adding the flowers in there and then adding different degree of detail. So the florals that you choose to add more toward the foreground compared to those on the floral archway in the background. How are you varying the tones and the details in those arrangements to make it make sense and add depth in the painting? Those are decisions that you have to make as a painter, right? And you have to do them quickly. Have fun. Good luck. Centerpieces. I've seen many different varieties of centerpieces. A lot of times it's a floral with a vase and a candle combo. Some picture frames, some little frames with actual photos, some frames with like the table numbers, tablescapes, dinnerware, painting the different napkin folded patterns and goblets and plates and chargers and getting the different detail in the tablecloths. You got to be able to paint tablecloths. You have to be able to paint a tabletop and not make it look too oblong or too like you got to make the perspective perfect in the room, if that makes sense. I definitely go into this in more detail in the Wedding Painter's Blueprint. So if you're interested or would just like one-on-one coaching on painting freaking tables in a room, I'm happy to help. But that's something that we have to do and do well, so it's not an unimportant detail. Painting a table in a room is not something that can just be like whipped up and ignored. It tells the story. So you have to do it properly. Painting folds and pleats in tablecloths, lace, whether it's see-through or, like, don't get me started on tablecloths, but we got to paint them. We got to paint them a lot of decisions to be made. Chairs, paint a lot of chairs. And you got to paint chairs quickly because it's not the most important thing, But again, you can't have chairs like floating too big or too small. You have to be observant and try to nail as quickly as possible the form, the color, and the perspective of the chair properly, and make sure it's the right size proportionately to the people in the room. Like that, those are decisions that have to be made. Um, if I can avoid painting chairs, I would, but sometimes it's like, okay, what this room needs is chairs around those tables. So you got to do that. A lot of the things that I get to paint are just that. They're little treasures, they're little experiments, they're little studies for me. So I think about it, the way I think about it is, oh, I got to paint, um, a new style of picture frame or whatever. I got to paint an acrylic translucent chair this time, and I hadn't done that in a while, or haven't done that before. Some things you just have to paint. You just got to get them in the room, and you got to do so to the best of your ability. So there you go. A lot of, like, they call them BOGOs, where it's like a light, like a projected image on the floor or the wall. A lot of monograms that have been put on the floor. A lot of times those are very linear and design heavy. They're like vector images, and so getting the bride and the groom on the floor, getting the lighting effect based on the light in the room, whether that's coming from a light from the photographer or the chandelier above or whatever, spotlighting, whatever, getting that light and shadow effect, and then coming back on top with the pattern, the monogram element that they love, that they have to have in the painting. It's just a lot of layers of detail, and I get to paint that. Yay. Some other, like, lanyap extra things like greenery walls and floral walls and neon signs and things like that. Like, those are all elements that people are really excited about in their wedding. They've spent money on that backdrop for their photo booth, and it says they're Mr. and Mrs. whatever, or the Joneses or whatever, and they're really excited about that. Putting that in the painting is also a sweet nod. You can ask them in your confirmation call or your discovery calls, or anything that you're excited about that you'd like me to add in the painting. I paint a lot of cakes. That's been really fun. Getting the tonal quality in the cakes and the lighting effects and like the reflected lighting, it's basically a bunch of stacked cylinders essentially. If you're going to break it down to like the simplest form, a wedding cake, if it's like a tiered cake, is a bunch of stacked cylinders. Well, how does light play affect the cake to make it look like it's in the room with everything else that's going on, and not just a white pyramid? Like, you've got to pay attention to those details. Anyway, get to paint a lot of cakes. And then little added Easter eggs, little special guests. I used to paint a lot of pet portraits. I don't paint as many these days just because I do a lot more portraiture, I guess. That's kind of where that's the requests that come in from me, is, studio commissions. It's more portraits. So I don't do as many pet portraits, but I get to paint a lot of pets in wedding paintings. So that's fun. And people love to see their pets. And then their wedding guests. I always tell the bride and the groom, if we're going to add your dogs, get ready, because nobody's going to care that you're in there anymore. All they're going to care about is the dogs. And they're usually like, they love that idea. That's fine. So I get to paint dogs and cats and other little animals. A lot of mascots. I've painted mascots. Like, I went to LSU, and Mike the Tiger is a big deal. And so I've painted Mike the Tiger a couple of times in paintings. Minnie and Mickey Mouse I've painted in there. Other little Easter eggs that are sentimental to people. So butterflies, birds, cardinals especially, but like representatives of family members who have passed away. Like little moments, bubbles, or sparklers, or things that people have chosen to include in their wedding to an extent, to remind them of family members who have passed away, or to remind them of a loved one, or inside jokes, that kind of thing. Like I get to add that in the painting. How fun. How fun is that? I get to include other people in that experience as well. I love handing off the paintbrush and letting whoever, whether it's the bride, the groom, the parents, the little flower girls, guest, maybe not any guest, maybe somebody who's behaving themselves. But I get to pass the brush and say, leave your mark. How cool is that? And that means that every time they go visit their friends and they get to see the painting, they could be like, I did that little brush stroke. I painted that little leaf right there. It's just fun. It's inclusive. It's entertaining. I love it. I love being able to do that. And I've never had anyone damage a painting. I've never had anyone do something that was um, really inappropriate, like paint over the bride's face or something. It's always fun. It's always, and I'm always there with them. So yeah, there's just between all of the details and the sentimental details that the clients are really excited about, all of the beautiful elements that can be found in most wedding venues. I painted in this historic library, the Peabody Library in, I'm going to blank on what state it's in. That's my pregnancy brain for you, but the George Peabody Library, go look it up. I get to paint a ceremony in there. And so like all of the different exposed levels with all of the different books and shelves full of books and the gorgeous like architectural elements in the space, it made for a really, really pretty painting. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. Oh my gosh. But man, that was a really popular piece when I shared it online. A lot of people were awestruck because of it. I mean, it was gorgeous. Um, yeah, just really, really beautiful things that I get to paint. It's not the same thing over and over again. Each one is its own new challenge. Every bride and groom is different. Every lace gown is different. You can kind of learn some tricks for the same style, painting that over and over again. I'll share this one little trick. If you're painting a black and white checkered floor, it is not black and white. Okay. Usually I start on the black squares. I start with kind of a purple green tone that is like bumped down in value. So it's a little bit more of a gray. It's not sharp black. I start with a grayer tone for the black squares, and then the white squares, I will also start with a darker value. And then that way, when you're adding the shadows or like where the groom is standing, that shadow that's coming down off of him paired with the light that's being shined behind him, that is where you add your deepest value. Maybe not black, maybe it's a darker, Payne's gray type of tone, right next to that warmer bright white with a little hint of yellow, like that pairing, that it deepens the shadows and enhances the lighting effect. And then that has been a trick that I've used to capture the shininess of and the depth in those black and white checkered floors. So use that if you'd like. But you learn some tricks when you paint things over and over again. You can understand depth in a venue when you've been able to paint it more than once. Certain venues in New Orleans, I know not to worry about painting like these corners or these edges because I know what I'm painting in the foreground. So, you kind of get a little faster, make those decisions, like I said, more easily and with more confidence with practice. But this job is all about decision making and leaning into the details that really matter, and then leaning into stylizing the details that you want to push out of focus, if that makes sense. It is not a lazy thing to like, well, I don't care about that. Nobody cares about that. So I'm just going to like off to the edge. It's not about that. It's about telling a story and orchestrating the composition so that the viewer is engaged when they're looking at the painting. Their eye is bouncing all around the painting and then lands on the most important parts, which likely are the bride and the groom. That's where your highest point of contrast is. That's where the light is hitting most intensely, usually. I love also when there's light in the center of the room, if there's light hitting the bride and the groom or hitting the dance floor in like a spotlight. If you're going to put florals in the foreground, paint them in the shadows so that it appears to the viewer like you are. It's not like a bright red rose, because that's too distracting. The focal point is in the center of the composition, in the middle ground, if you will. So pushing those florals in the foreground just a little, just out of focus, and a little darker. So it appears that you're peering through them or past them to the more important part of the painting. That's another little trick that I like. But anyway, isn't that cool? There's a whole lot, and that just scratches the surface. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've painted at over 600 weddings. They're all different. I look forward to each and every one. And really, I just kind of wanted to tell you all of this because I'm getting all of the paintings that I've done earlier this year and recently out of the studio doors. I'm entering maternity leave, which means there's nothing on my on my drying rack. My next wedding isn't until the end of October. I did keep a few weddings. I canceled the ones that were immediately postpartum, but I kept a few local ones because I don't like that much time to pass between weddings. This is my fourth child, and so I've done this before. And I know what type of rest my body needs leading up to delivery and then postpartum, praying that we have another healthy delivery. But my last wedding was in the middle of June, and my next wedding is at the end of October. And for me, that's a big old break. I don't like that. I don't like going too long between jobs. I feel a little rusty. Like usually I come back very invigorated, very creatively driven because I love the work. I love the job. But I show up and I'm like, oh crap. How do I do this again? That confidence kind of wavers because it's been a minute, right? So I don't like, if I wouldn't have kept those jobs, if I would have taken the whole 3 months maternity leave, like true break, I wouldn't have had a wedding until January. So June to January. Oh my God. I couldn't imagine. Not doing the work for that long of a period of time. So maybe I'll create some pretty things in the studio. Like I've kind of teased a little bit. I'm working on something to be made available, like a resource guide for artists and wedding painters. I'm working on that behind the scenes. I'm not going to tell you too much, like I said in past episodes, because if it doesn't happen, if I can't complete the project before the baby comes, then I'm sorry, you're going to have to wait. But I'm trying. I am trying, I promise, to get it done before then. So more to come on that. But yeah, studio is going to be a little slow. Maybe I'll tidy up in here. Who knows? Maybe I'll paint something for fun. I was really excited to paint this Soroya study. So maybe I'll do some more playful things like that I can't sell because they're master studies. I don't know. Can you sell a master study? I kind of want to keep them. Like I painted it for me, so why sell it, right? So maybe I'll get it framed and put it up in the baby's room. I don't know. But anyway, have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you for tuning in. If you've been inspired by this episode, please share it on social media or with whoever. Please leave a comment or a review for the podcast. I know I ask for that often at the end of each episode, but I'm going to reach out and ask again if you wouldn't mind leaving a review, sharing this episode with friends, and then let me know what else you want to hear about, because not a lot of painting for the next couple of months, but I'll be showing up here every week. So let's chat. Let's chat about what you want to hear me chat about. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next week. Bye. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on this journey of artistic exploration, entrepreneurial growth, and personal development. Remember, you have the power to create a life that is both fulfilled and balanced. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe to The Composed Artist on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And don't forget to leave us a review. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more creatives like you. Until next time, keep creating, keep dreaming, and keep pursuing that composed life. You got this.